In this video, there's a lot to discuss, so I will try to be brief and hopefully my notes will make sense of most of what I don't say. So first of all, there is a PowerPoint about morality, and it defines both morality and character, which are two things that, well, obviously morality helps you understand what we're talking about, the definition does, and the definition of character helps you understand this is something we want to hone and shape that will help us make good moral decisions. I want to explain the modern moral debate slide, which talks about the basic goods theory and revisionism, which is also known as proportionalism. This is kind of the two schools of thought today. So the basic goods theory kind of sees sin like this. Everything is equal. You know, murder is the same as lying, is the same as stealing. And then the revisionism or proportionalism sees sin more like this, or more like values, things that we value. So if we value life as the most important thing and truth below that, then you could justify lying to a Nazi soldier if you're hiding a Jewish person in your basement, because saving their life is more important than telling the truth. And I think it's easy to see kind of how Christian religions can fall in those two continuums. Because in the Catholic faith, we talk about mortal sin is the worst sin and then venial sin. But in other churches, they talk about, like other denominations of Christianity, they talk about all sin being basically equal. Some other things that are factors when considering how sinful something is would be a person's intention. In order for something to be a mortal sin, it has to be a grave matter. A person has to fully consent, and they have to have full knowledge of what they're consenting to. And so our intention could kind of impact either the full knowledge or the full consent for that. And sometimes people have good intentions and they just go awry. So for example, sometimes people, like women, are often told to use the birth control pill to regulate their periods. And a lot of women use birth control to have control over having children. And those are two different intentions. If you're using it for a medical purpose, that changes the morality of it versus what you're basically saying to God about your own, having control over creation. Other things, there's circumstances that can change that. Who, when, where, why. Who does something like, let's say it's someone who's mentally challenged or they have a mental illness. Or when, maybe someone murders someone in self-defense and that's different. Or where a bar brawl, hurting and killing someone versus hurting someone in self-defense, like if you're in the Sudan and there's a war and you're fighting to protect your people. The why, like we talked about Edward Snowden, and he was someone who was a whistleblower and told some of the government secrets about how they were reading our emails. And how moral that is depends on why did he do it. Did he do it for the common good, or did he do it to get some fame, to earn some money? Who knows? Also, there's always alternatives when we're making a moral decision. We should always ask ourselves, what's the alternative? If I don't do this action, what else could I do? And we should always think about the consequences. And this is especially important. We have a ripple effect with all of our actions. We should always think ahead about that. We have this saying that the ends doesn't justify the means. This means, the end is our end goal. Like, what do we want to see happen? And so it wouldn't be okay to kill an abortion doctor to end abortion. Wanting to end abortion is a good thing, but killing someone to get to that end is not a good thing. So the ends doesn't justify the means. And there are some things we consider intrinsically evil, which means that they're wrong in every circumstance. The church would say abortion is intrinsically evil. I would say rape is a good example of something that's intrinsically evil. The next PowerPoint is about sexuality. And there's some definitions that I just want to go over really quickly. So take some notes. First of all, sexuality is a beautiful, good, extremely powerful, sacred energy given to us by God and experienced in every cell of our being. That's a quote from a book by Ronald Rolheiser called The Holy Longing. Adultery is voluntary sexual intercourse between married people, or at least one person's married. Fornication is voluntary sex between two unmarried people. Polygamy is the practice of having more than one spouse, and polyandry, which isn't on this slide, is the practice of having multiple husbands versus multiple wives. Incest is sex between closely related people. 6 states in the U.S. allow you to marry your first cousin. That's kind of scary. Chastity is refraining from intercourse or staying faithful in marriage. Fidelity is conjugal faithfulness, so faithfulness within marriage. And then natural law is this thing that we can observe in nature and see how God designed the world and how he wants it to happen. You know, if it's designed a certain way, then that's an indicator that that's what God intended. There are several references to sex in the Bible, but from the beginning of the Bible, we know that there's two purposes of sex. One is procreation and one is unity, to express love and to create children. For the majority of church history, procreation has been the focus. There have definitely been times where in the church they said to have sex without the possibility of getting pregnant was totally immoral, like if a woman was already pregnant. And so there's some references on the slide to different passages in the Bible. And also there's a slide about the history of it. I talk about St. Augustine, who really shaped a lot of early church teaching about sexuality. He himself felt that this was his greatest vice and his greatest weakness because he rejected Christianity early on, as you know from the reading. And so his idea that sex was kind of disordered and only purposeful for procreation, I think, had a negative effect in the history of the church. The penitential books that I reference here, in a long time part of church history, they created books that a priest could use when someone came to reconciliation. And a lot of the things listed in that book had to do with sexual issues or moral issues. Also at the Council of Trent, they kind of emphasized that the priest was kind of the disciplinarian here and had to make a penance that was appropriate. And so, again, sex seemed so disordered at that point in time. On one of my first slides, I say that the church has always been afraid of sex, and I think that's not necessarily true today. I'm just saying in the history of the church, there have been lots of times where they treated sex like it was dangerous or a bad thing. Of course, it's a beautiful thing and it's a good thing, and we're growing in our understanding of that today. The most important focus is more on the unitive part, and it used to be in the church history that celibacy was seen here and married love was down here, but we're seeing those more as equal today. I have slides about abortion, and I think basically most people know the church teaches that abortion is wrong in every situation. We believe life begins at conception and ending a life is immoral. Also, there are cases that people always bring up of rape and if the mother's life is in danger. Just want to touch on those really quick. If the mother's life is in danger, then we would do everything in our power to save the mother, and we just wouldn't go in and directly kill a baby. But if a baby dies naturally by treating the mother, then that's considered a miscarriage. And also, we don't advocate for abortion in the case of rape, but we do today understand that fertilization doesn't happen until about 48 to 72 hours after sexual intercourse. And in that time, if a person goes to a Catholic hospital is allowed to do something that could kill a sperm, or to give a woman something that would halt her ovulation cycle, like a hormonal treatment, but they can't do anything that would kill the baby. And in the end, it doesn't really do any good to a woman who's already been raped to add to that the tragedy of having an abortion. I have several slides that just go through the development of the fetus just to make the case that this is an actual human life. I have slides about birth control. The church teaches against the use of birth control because this is altering natural law and it's kind of playing God. And so that's pretty much explained here. What the church does endorse is what's called natural family planning, or NFP. And this would be not having sexual intercourse when you know that you're fertile. And there's signs in a woman's body that are going to happen anyway. And so it's just empowering women to use that information to kind of control when they have children, but not to keep themselves from having children. And then I have lots of statistics about the birth control pills and stuff like that. Also with reproductive technologies, the church is against in vitro fertilization and surrogacy. Again, it goes against natural law. A child wasn't intended to be created in a petri dish, and it just, again, goes against natural law. And so there's some information about that. Also in your book, it talks about masturbation. This used to be seen as like the worst sin that you could commit, mostly because of Onan, who's in the book of Genesis. when Onan spilled his seed, he was struck dead instantly. And so the interpreters of the Pentateuch believe that meant that God really did not like masturbation. It's still seen as immoral because it is a selfish act, because there's no chance for procreation and it's not unitive. And today, again, those are the two things that need to happen. It needs to be the possibility for it to be procreative. You don't have to be trying to have a child every time, and it needs to be unitive. And that's why masturbation is neither, and therefore it's wrong. I have some slides about premarital sex, which again, the church teaches against. Sex should be safe for marriage. And then there's some statistics and information about that. Finally, homosexuality is also something that's very controversial today. The church does teach that to act on your homosexual tendencies could be immoral. To be homosexual is not immoral, but to act on it is where it becomes immoral. And this is mostly based on natural law, because homosexual people aren't able to procreate and their bodies just don't fit together physically like a man and a woman's do. They don't complement each other. However, we don't know everything at this point in time, and I know that scientists are trying to determine what causes a person to be homosexual, and at this point we don't know the answer to that. So the conversation could change, but at this point homosexual acts are what's considered immoral. Also, there's a slide on marriage and divorce. The church teaches against divorce. Marriage is something that's supposed to be permanent, but they do recognize that there are times where marriages don't work out, and in those cases we approve something called annulments. And one thing that's good about annulments is that they're looked at individually, so they look at every case and they try to salvage any marriages that they can. The annulment process recently got made quicker and easier thanks to Pope Francis, and probably more in his papacy will be said about marriage and divorce. It's usually true that a person who's divorced and remarried cannot receive communion. However, the Pope in a recent document said that the priest should be kind of the judge of what to do in those cases. And then I have a slide that a woman, Sister Margaret Farley, wrote a book called Just Love, and in it she has several norms for people in a relationship, and I just thought that was really helpful. I'm going to post another PowerPoint here about some bioethics that go along with this slide, or with this topic. It's not in the book, but it's just good information.